people before Profit, following on from the national launch that was launched earlier on. I think it was beginning of this month. So obviously people will know that we're currently living in a country which is, partly in lockdown, depending on where you're situated. Obviously, for us in Lancashire, we are certainly in lockdown. We have certainly seen a difference in this second wave to the way that we've been treated, to the way that we was treated in the first, and some of the consequences of that, of the homelessness that are still being left on the streets with no decent homes being provided for people. The fact that people are going to be expected to try and survive on 67% of their income, many of those people probably already on the lowest pay of anywhere in the region, and of course the fact that the government hasn't implemented on this occasion the same as it did last time, the eviction ban, which will stop people being kicked out of their homes for failing to pay their rent. We're seeing a rise in cases in workplaces, and many of them we believe are because that people are expected to make a decision on whether to isolate or go to work on a paltry statutory pay, which equates to £95 or £13.70 a day, which means they would be faced with a decision of whether they can afford to pay the rent or buy the food. And of course, we've seen the government launch, as per usual, distraction types of politics, which demonizes migrants, so we can have somebody to blame for the hardships that we are suffering. So obviously tonight we're going to be discussing about how we can come together collectively, how we can improve the society and the communities that we live in, that we belong to, and obviously listen to the experiences of people and what they're facing outside in Lancashire. We have changed slightly the agenda because a couple of people have got to leave the meeting, but we are starting with Defender Jobs and extend the furlough scheme. And obviously it's a pleasure to invite Ross Quinn, who's currently the full-time officer of Unite that's dealing with the Rolls-Royce workforce, who was just just backed a strike against their employer who is intending to transfer their jobs. So Ross, if I could invite you to the meeting, please.
Thanks, Ian. And obviously, thanks for the invite to bring this issue to everybody's attention. Obviously, the dispute is something that we're all living and breathing at the moment. So I'll do my best to keep to the 3 minutes and just give everybody as much information I can about how we got to the position that we're in. I suppose if we go back a few months to the start of the pandemic, it's supporting the shop stewards on site. We basically we're dealing with a situation where Rolls-Royce has many issues, many genuine issues to do with the pandemic because of the way their business model is set up and the fact that they basically need planes to be flying in the sky to get money in, to be able to have cash flow. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we've got obviously a well-established shop stewards network right throughout Rolls-Royce, and they were in negotiations with the company. And initially, when they made announcements about potential redundancies, I'm sure a lot of people will remember that the CEO was caught smirking on TV as he was announcing 9,000 redundancies, which was pretty unforgivable straight off the bat. However, the representatives that we've got basically negotiated with the employer, looked at ways that they could try and get through the crisis that they were facing, and a voluntary severance program was opened up. And for our area and for the site in Barnoldswick, that meant that over 150 people volunteered for enhanced conditions for voluntary severance. So there was no need for site level consultation and looking at compulsory redundancies. However, pretty quickly after those people had volunteered, the company come back and said that they still believed that they needed to make 50 redundancies on site. And I think what I always try and do working with representatives is look at, you know, when we're looking at redundancies, is it completely unavoidable, or, you know, is there a way to push back against the employer and you know, really take a hard line about every job is vital. More often than not in these type of sectors, when they're gone, we don't get them back. So, you know, how do we get on the front foot and really push back against employers making redundancies? And the reps that we've got at Barnoldswick are absolutely outstanding. And what they did was they calculated that they could enact a shorter working week where everybody works a few less hours per week, and the savings for the business would mean that these extra 50 jobs that the employer was intending and making compulsory redundant, they could actually cover the cost of that. And they got the members to vote on that, and they went and started negotiations with the employer. So all of this up until this point, you know, whether you like it or not, I suppose, are quite common practice, and really the reps and the workers should be, you know, really sort of given credit for what they've done and what they were prepared to offer to try and support the business and the long-term viability of the site.
Ross,
however,
can you wind up, please?
Yeah, so what happened was at this point, the employer basically said to us that that it wasn't feasible, so they dismissed the shorter working week and basically looked at making compulsory redundancies, but also at the same time said in the press that there was going to be the transferring of work to Singapore, which would mean another 350 jobs, which would potentially put the site at risk. So where we are today is we had a consultative ballot, a formal ballot, and we're due to start strike action, targeted strike action on the 6th of November. Because it's clear to us that it's completely unacceptable that the employer is currently getting billions of pounds worth of backing off the UK government and is choosing to transfer jobs to Singapore. So they will say that this is the pandemic and there's a drop in work. We accept that, but transferring work from Barnoldswick to Singapore is a decision that the company is making. So our members have made it clear that they're going to do whatever it takes to fight for this site, and that's why we're starting this action, which is initially in phase 1, 3 weeks continuous action with key departments within the workplace that we're taking out.
Thank you very much for that, Ross. Obviously, you know, I think on behalf of everybody on here tonight, we would want to send a message of solidarity to your members who are going to be taking strike action, and I'm sure many of us will probably, you know, look for where those strikes are taking part, so we can come and join your picket lines as well. So please pass on our best wishes and solidarity, mate.
Cheers. Thanks.
Obviously, people know that the University College Union has been at the forefront, and I think, you know, have argued quite strongly about the risks of returning universities back. And I think they've definitely been proved to have been right. So it's a pleasure to introduce Michelle McKrell from UCU, who's branch chair from UClan. Michelle.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you, friends and comrades, for the opportunity to contribute to this excellent event. As you know, UClan it's an educational charity. Its purpose is to provide education, and of course, to do that, it must be managed financially soundly, but it does not require the generation of ever-expanding profits. However, UClan is extremely wealthy. It has cash reserves of around 90 million. It has very low borrowings of around 6 million, and it's planning to spend 40 million this year alone on the master plan. The university's income is growing rapidly. Full-time student enrolments have increased by an average of 1,200 students in the last 2 years. Staff pay is currently frozen, and of course UClan gets labour on the cheap by not paying the living wage to its lowest paid workers. And furthermore, 240 colleagues have left on VR over the last 16 months. At the outbreak of the COVID-19 crisis, University staff worked selflessly to minimise the impact on students, to move course content swiftly and seamlessly online. They devised new methods of teaching and assessment to ensure that students could graduate and progress with minimal disruption. And in preparation for the new academic year, they worked hard over the summer to develop flexible methods that would ensure continued delivery, both remotely and for those who have to deliver on campus, for those to move rapidly to online delivery when the public health situation necessitated it, and it does. Through all this, staff have provided online support and counselling to anxious students. And they're now being rewarded with the threats of compulsory redundancy that will see many experienced staff thrown out of work into an already critically poor local jobs market, with negligible opportunities for redeployment and in their areas of expertise and within the region. UCU considers this another betrayal of UClan's claim to be a civic university and an anchor institution. UCU members have a proud tradition of success in influencing the direction of the university has taken in the past and taking on the very worst of management's excesses. We fought privatisation and the group structure in 2013. We fought cost containment redundancies in 2014. We fought the imposition of revised job descriptions in 2015, and we won back illegally docked pay for taking strike action in 2016. And just as we have before, we can fight this battle and win. Our members have already signed up to pledge to act on the fundamental principles of trade unionism and send a clear signal to management that we will not stand idly by and let this happen. And we will not allow colleagues to be sacrificed to appease a management that evidently does not have the interests of its workforce or the educational inheritance of the institution at heart. Friends, UClan UCU has won before. We will again. I appreciate you listening to what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. And obviously, you know, UCU have been right in everything that they've been doing up to press to keep the students protected. And obviously, you know, we wish you best of luck in your fight. The next person that's going to be speaking is slightly tweaking the agenda. So we're going to be inviting Matthew Brown, who doesn't really need any introduction. He's been seen as you know, and widely credited for being part of putting forward an economic strategy that's really improved Preston, seen as a model that we want to take forward across the country. So Matthew Brown.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for an invite to this event, and thanks Ian for the very kind words. So I'll try and fit everything in 3 minutes. It's not going to be easy for all of us, but because we all like to talk a bit, but I'll do my best in 3 minutes. So obviously we are stuck in quite a collective trauma with the pandemic, and it's been something that none of us expected, and it really has hit our communities really badly. And as a council leader trying to fight this on the front line, it's been heartbreaking when you've got a government that isn't giving you the support and infrastructure you need to effectively tackle it. You know, we've had cases of PPE not arriving on time. We've had cases of being told about how minority communities are being affected disproportionately by the pandemic. And then if you talk about the contact tracing system, there's £12 billion that have been outsourced to unaccountable corporations who have absolutely no idea in how to deliver public health. And that could have been delivered more efficiently by local government and the NHS. And it would have seen 60 people employed in every single ward across the country working in the public sector to deliver that service. And imagine what kind of community response we'd have had if we'd have had that going ahead. So we've seen wealth extraction from all our money to these corporations that often seem more interested in rewarding the investors and actually delivering the service that's needed. And the democratic accountability is not there, in the sense that, you know, through your local representative, that accountability isn't there anymore. And, you know, this has been dreadful in the sense that all these tragedies have followed austerity. So in our country, we've had 10 years of austerity. And it's very difficult to respond to shocks like this if you've had so many cuts to public services, to local jobs. That infrastructure isn't there. And the whole response from this government has made it a lot worse. So, you know, so obviously we're doing what we can as a city council, and finally we are getting some responsibilities to run the contact tracing system and other things, but we've just not had that infrastructure going on. And the reality is that in this country, there's still widespread tax avoidance and evasion. It's estimated there's £100 billion that's either avoided in taxation by big corporations that are very wealthy, or through tax evasion measures as well. You know, so, you know, we've got an economy that is rigged in favour of the top 1%. And what's happened worldwide through this pandemic is we've seen the billionaires who already have infinite wealth, often at our expense. They've seen across the globe their wages increased by, their wealth increased by over a quarter. So it's about 27% of the richest people in our world community have increased their wealth by. And there's real questions about democracy, because people who are that wealthy in large corporations often influence the people you vote for at a political level. So if you look at the current American election, obviously the Democratic Party is much better, but both main parties are obviously influenced by corporate lobbying, which sets policy. So there's real issues about democracy going forward. But obviously in Preston, we want to fight back, and we want to really try and build that better. So we're trying to promote a new economic model. So obviously we're the first authority in the north of England to promote the real living wage, and we're going to continue doing that going forward. And obviously, you know, we're trying to persuade UClan to become a living wage employer. We're going to work with the TUC soon to encourage trade union membership and trade union recognition on a campaign. And obviously that's needed because people are safer in workplaces that are unionised. And then we've got other ideas. We're very keen on expanding cooperatives. So we've established worker cooperatives. We've got 3 already, including some taxi drivers and digital students from UClan. But there's a real opportunity for trade unions to get behind that new economy. We're in control of our own economic destiny, because this government and the current economic model, it's not going to work in favour of working people. So locally and regionally, we've got to create an alternative. We're looking to establish a regional cooperative bank. So this will be a people's bank to stop the wealth extraction from the large banks out of our communities. And we need the trade union movement behind that. We're looking how we can support the tackling the climate emergency agenda. So we're looking
at up, please, Matty.
Yeah, opportunities for disinvestment from fossil fuels for our own investments, and looking at community and public energy networks. And then also we're looking at how the council can do things like not only build a new cinema that will be in the ownership of the city, so we can look at employing local people and using local supply chains, but potentially how the council could, through a company or directly, build local authority housing again. So we've got to do things in our own way from the grassroots upwards, because we're not going to get any support from this government. And also we've got a neoliberal economic model that has worked against the interests of the working class for the last 40 years. So thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Matt. And obviously the model that you've been putting forward has obviously been recognised as making a significant contribution to the improvement for people's lives in Preston. So well done to you and what you've been doing. Obviously, most of us know that the NHS is not just the silverware. It's probably the most important thing and the best representative ever that socialism has ever produced. And so obviously public ownership of services and then outsourcing is critical for an economy that works for us all. So obviously it's a pleasure to invite Jono Grizedale from the Lancashire Hospital Trust, who's the Unite representative. Jono?
Good evening. Yeah, thanks a lot, Ian. Good evening, folks. I represent at the moment staff who are the unsung heroes of the NHS. 82% of clinical decisions are made directly in Path Lab. The staff in Path Lab are responsible for 82% of clinical decision making. And sorry for Holly in the background. I like having her next to me because she keeps me focused on what we're fighting for. It's about the future. That 82% of decision making only costs 2% of the budget. So it's extremely efficient. But as soon as you start talking about the money side of the business and the efficiencies within the business, somebody wants to come and put them somewhere else and start to make a profit off the top of it. There is a plan in place to create a super path lab. a hub and spoke model where all our so-called cold services would be grouped together on one site, and each individual hospital would have its own tiny little testing lab for emergency stuff. It's not the worst idea in the world. There are some positives to it, but if you live in Barrow, if you live in a care home just outside Barrow, the site that's been chosen is Leyland. So you've got an ulcer on your ankle, and a nice lady comes to swab it, and she sends the swab off. A chap in a van is going to drive around every bloody care home and every GP surgery collecting swabs up till that van's full. Then he's got to drive the 75 miles to Leyland. You may only have a 4-hour viability on a blood sample or a sample that is going to that testing centre, even though it's called cold and not emergency. If that's an MRSA positive sore on your leg, it's an emergency for you, isn't it? You know, it needs treating ASAP. But if your sample has got outside its viability, are we going to get back accurate results? That 82% could well be eroded. We believe as a trade union that the drive behind this is simply finance. And we believe that because in the outline business case, we were told that there would be a financial saving made, and having drilled through that outline business case, the only place to make that financial saving was on staff. When they moved the staff to one site, there will be less staff. So they were looking to get rid of staff. What they've overlooked, one of the many things they've overlooked, is all those staff are being paid on different rates of pay at different hospitals. There are golden handshakes and golden hellos here and there. Ours is possibly the worst paid. There's about a £7,000 difference across the 4 hospitals involved in this collaboration project, which guarantees you I will be able to get the ballot in. And that Sharon Graham tells us, if you can't get the ballot in, you might as well F off home. Well, I can guarantee if there's a £7,000 difference between one lot of staff and another lot of staff, we can get the ballot in, so we can stop this. But we will need support from the public. So I'm going to reach out to you and ask you to keep your eyes open for what you're being told about PathLab, because this week we were told.
Jono, can you wind up, please?
Yeah. We managed to stop the previous process by paying very close attention to it and highlighting the fact that it was corrupt. And this week, PricewaterhouseCoopers have agreed with us and said that the process that was used before was very crude in its mechanics. So just keep an eye on PathLab for us. Thanks very much. Good evening.
Cheers, Jono. Really appreciate that, and obviously the work that your members have been doing on the front line during this crisis. Now, obviously, the campaign to keep the Chorley A&E open has been proved to be quite valid, and recently led to them being opened during this crisis. So it's a pleasure to invite Jenny Hurley to address the meeting. Jenny.
Hello. Sorry, John, I can't see you on this. I'm on twice because I can't see you on this one, so I apologise. I'm the other account. Yeah, we are a local campaign, very much within the community, and I just want to highlight a few of the things that we've done, which is going to be very hard because it's in 3 minutes, but I'll give it a go. We started when they closed Chorley A&E on the 18th of April, and on the 16th, which was the Saturday before, we went and picketed outside the hospital. There were thousands of people from across the board. There were trade unionists, there were political parties, but there were people from the community, which obviously is always a sticking point in a lot of campaigns. And it's impossible to go into the details on all about the closures, but it is important to know that, like many other A&Es, are part of a restructure across the whole of England, from a universal healthcare model to a business insurance-based model. We're having step-by-step closures. It does make the closure of this A&E inevitable. But so far, we've had 2 partial successes, getting the A&E reopened for 12 hours in January in 2017, and it's due to reopen again on the 2nd of November from 8 till 5, after it was closed under COVID. We carried on picketing the hospital, and apart from the time when we were in lockdown, obviously we had a couple of months away, but we have actually been there this Saturday. It'll be 244 weeks. So this is 4.5 years. So I just want to go into a few things really about how you keep something going for such a long time, because we all know it isn't easy. So there's some key points, and I think the first one to note is the full community involvement. We organised events to keep it visible to the public and do fundraising as well. We got the branding. The branding was very good, the yellow logo, try and get it visible in as many places as possible. We've had a local company donated banners and placards. We had a local choir and a sound engineer donated their time to produce Fix You, which was shared and performed locally for
1 minute left.
Time. Sorry,
1 minute left.
Right, okay. Carols singing, sponsored walks. We've had Rivington Barn Bikers, Wigan Diggers, Preston People's Festival. We had a market stall for 3 years where we had tombolas. We had all that by people just coming and donating the time. But we also had trade union and political backing. We had trade union support, including some donations, many bodies at events, elected representatives. We've had 2 borough councils passing motions to support us, county council motion looking to support the Secretary of State referring it back, all sorts right across the board. It's been absolutely amazing support. We've also supported other campaigns, and it's kept our voice going as well as supporting them.
Please
so
wind
I think
up.
what I really want to just say is it's always been a core group who's made this base. And I'd like the opportunity to thank all of them, because it wouldn't have happened without them. They go to organising meetings, staffing events, attending local authority NHS meetings on the closure, researching reports and sending them back to them. And if it wasn't for all those people, Chorley and South Ribble A&E would already be closed. So I think it's really important for everyone to know that it's important to be inclusive of everybody right across the board, because none of this could have been possible without the input from all those individuals across the communities, all the organisations that have supported us at each event. And it's important to note that one small act from each of you has led to this whole. And if I've learned anything from this campaign, it's only as good as the support you have. So keep inviting others to support you and keep supporting others to make that whole, which leads us back to what we all know, and that is we're stronger together. If I could just give a shout out, if you can support NHS Pay 15, we won't have an NHS if we don't have NHS staff. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Jenny. And campaigning does work, as it's been proved up in Scotland, where they've today announced the pardon of all of those miners that were convicted in 1984, and rightly so. Now we need the rest of the country to do exactly the same too. Obviously, the health and safety issue in workplaces and the fight to make sure that people are protected is essential if we're to get through this crisis. And obviously the NEU have played an essential part in raising many of those issues. And obviously it's a pleasure now to invite Ian Watkinson from the NEU National Health and Safety, who's the National Health and Safety Committee Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks for asking me, and thanks, Janet, as well. Pleased to be involved with this initiative and to help provide a snapshot of where we are in our schools and colleges right now. So, working closely with other education trade unions, the National Education Union has helped lead the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, working to keep members, schools and communities as safe as possible, supporting teaching and learning, and strongly campaigning for government to support education during this critical period. Having reached half term, members are telling us that their working environments in school and colleges are becoming more and more pressurised and more unstable than ever before. With colleagues increasingly absent from school through illness or self-isolating, workload has intensified for those still in their workplace. Add to that the constant acute concerns and fears felt by most that their workplaces are unsafe. Figures from Lancashire today show that the virus is still spreading, and that with over 14,000 children and 700 school staff now having to isolate, the impact on families and communities goes without saying. In much the same way as Johnson, Hancock, Gove and Williamson lied ahead of the September reopening of schools, promising everyone that schools were safe and that children don't transmit the virus, the DfE's latest figures on school attendance and Gavin Williamson's comments are yet another example of government looking to mislead and con the public into thinking that things aren't that bad. Sadly, things are very bad, and reliable data and feedback from education workers and the NHS locally show that the spread of the virus in the community is still being driven by schools and colleges forced to operate at full capacity, where social distancing and proper ventilation is impossible. In this unsafe environment, the government and the DfE are piling extra pressure on school leaders and local authorities in an effort to keep pupils in school and college. And this is leading in some instances to bad practice. Some members at higher risk of death from coronavirus are finding that their individual risk assessments are not being adhered to, and that their requests to work from home are not being granted. Some are reporting undue secrecy about COVID-19 outbreaks in their workplace. Others, the integrity of bubbles being compromised through classes having to double up, leadership learning walks, and even Ofsted marching round, while reduced lunchtimes, support staff being required to teach classes, and inadequate cleaning are all being increasingly reported. Members are also reporting deteriorating levels of pupil behaviour and well-being in schools, with increased concerns. 30 seconds, with increased concerns about the very difficult lives too many children are having to endure in poverty and deprivation, something which COVID-19 has exposed and compounded. Following the disgraceful decision to refuse to provide free school meals, I'll say that again, to refuse to provide free school meals during half term, last week's decision to ration laptops for disadvantaged children, with the government cutting allocations where the most needed by 80%, whilst at the same time putting a legal duty on schools to provide remote learning for those who need to isolate, is shameful. I'll wrap up now. We can't have safe communities without safe schools, and I look forward to being part of collective direct action and people before profits fight back across all workplaces and communities. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ian, and good luck with the fight. I mean, especially in the schools, it's definitely the front line. Obviously, before I introduce Janet, who's from Hazards and who organised tonight's event, I just remind people that in the chat there's some ideas and some proposals from tonight's meeting, which obviously fits in with the event that's going to be held on Saturday. And obviously there's a suggestion there too about setting up a donation for the strike fund at Royce and UClan, and as well as organising a cavalcade, organised cavalcades around Lancashire to support the picket line in Barnoldswick on the Friday the 6th of November. And the suggestion is also that this meeting is held on a monthly basis to make sure that we're organising. So those proposals are in the chat. Obviously, we're very grateful to Janet for organising tonight's meeting, because it is important. It is important that this meeting went ahead to discuss the issues that we face in Lancashire, and not only as Janet performed that in, by organising that this event tonight, but obviously the role that she performs in Hazards, which is an essential support and resource for safety representatives in the workplace. So it's a pleasure to invite Janet to address the meeting.
Thank you very much. And I wouldn't say it's just me. There's a number of people that have been involved in organising the event tonight. So the Hazards campaign is really pleased to support this emergency programme for jobs and safety and the action that needs to be taken to support it. And it's really good to be on the same platform as all some of these really important causes that have been raised tonight, and you'll hear more about in a minute. So how much you get paid, the conditions that you work under, your employment rights, the sector that you work on, the type of job that you do, your sex, your race, your age, your disability, or your class all determine how safe and how healthy you are at work. And this has never been more truer than through this pandemic. COVID-19 is centred in workplace health and safety, and it has highlighted the inadequate protection of many working people against risks at work, and how inequalities in society have increased workers' exposures to risk and the consequential infections. And many of the very same essential workers regarded highly through the pandemic were trying to survive on insecure 0 hours contracts, poverty wages, workers that have become disposable, and their work body breaking, driving workers to despair, and in too many cases to suicide, unsafe and unhealthy working conditions, and thousands of unnecessary deaths. And on top of this, too many workers have died from COVID-19 over the last few months. Workers where their risks weren't controlled by their employer, weren't provided with PPE or a proper standard of PPE because the government failed to provide it in sufficient quantities and those that needed, or to those that needed it. Workers in hospitals, care homes, transport, teachers, cleaners, taxi drivers, bus drivers, their fate was set because this government, their employers and the authorities who should have enforced health and safety law failed them. The impact of all our experiences of this year will scar and leave deep trauma amongst us all, and long COVID or the disabilities and ill health left behind for many will have lasting effects and their quality of life on their income and on their employment. This government has put business interests before public health, and we need to campaign for a zero COVID strategy, COVID safe workplaces, and the support needed to individuals for safe and healthy lives. Trade union organised workplaces are fighting to keep workers safe and healthy. And solidarity greetings from the Hazards campaign to all those that are fighting. We will stand with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet. Moving on, obviously, if ever there was a demonstration of campaigning and dogged determination, then the Lancashire Nanas are absolutely living proof that if you're determined, it doesn't matter who you are and what finances you've got at the back, you can be beat. So it's a pleasure to invite Tina Rothery.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me. So good to be in a room again full of people that are passionate about getting it right. And I think maybe we've all felt the same, that throughout this crisis, there's been so little ability to fight in the way that we used to fight. And certainly we can't go out and do as much physically because of the limitations of the virus. But you know, here in Lancashire, we did see over the last 10 years that plucky residents could just stand up and put aside all other differences and stand together united. And I remember seeing Ian the first time at the Barton Moss demonstration, bringing bread for the activists and for the campers. And that joining of the unions and us was a really big step forward. And I think it also made perhaps those in charge a little bit worried that we were going to form a giant gang, which I think is what we need to do. You know, all of the things you're fighting for in this campaign that are amazing and essential, I would argue, are only going to be worthwhile if we can breathe the air, drink the water, and, you know, and live. And so it's together that we need to create that better future. And all of the things that we're defending here, jobs, safe workplaces, taxing the wealthy, public ownership, the welfare system, will only be able to come to full fruition and if we save the planet as well. So together, I think that one of the best things about this is we are so joined up, because green investment, not only do we have plenty of money to throw at it, as we've seen by what the government's been throwing away time and again throughout this crisis, that there's all this money that we could have. And not only that, it's a much needed positivity in green investment. There's opportunity within that for great training, great jobs, and a positive future. And I think we've been so brought down by this crisis and left sad by it, that that's the sort of thing that will take us forward and give us something to look forward to. I worked with Gina Dowding, the MEP, on the Green New Deal for the Northwest. and the opportunities provided within that with home insulation, transport, and all of the other things that green energy are going to bring us, the decentralization of power, like literally putting it into the hands of communities where we get lowered bills. All of this needs to happen. And how do we do that? We do that by getting bigger. And this, with the line, people before profit, makes it very clear that this is what unites us all. And if we agree on that one fact, all of the other things we're fighting for will come together, because as we've seen, it's that profit motive that breaks everything. And until we break that, we won't succeed in any of our fights. So it's an absolute honor to stand alongside you all and to lend our support to however we proceed forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Tina. Moving on quickly, because I've noticed the time. Obviously, the welfare system is something that we're all, at some point in our lives, going to be dependent on. And you know, decent homes, it should be the right for all of us. So it's a very, very important part of tonight's event. That this next particular bit, and obviously, so I'm pleased to welcome Mel Close, who's the manager of the Disability and Equality for the North West.
Hiya, thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the invite. Janet, I'm going to try and stick to time. So what I've decided to do is just read you out a bullet point list of what the main issues are for disabled people in Lancashire at the moment that we're finding. And obviously, this is in addition to the same issues that everybody is facing, because they obviously face those as well. So firstly, access to work. So you'll be aware that disabled people in employment will have in-work assessments, workplace assessments for to try and meet their needs in the workplace. Well, in March, the workplace completely changed. So for our own staff, so we've got 25, 26 staff, they're all working from home most of the time, so their workplace completely changed. So it's been really difficult for disabled people in employment to get access to work to do that reassessment. It's a little bit better now, but we've spent a good 6-7 months with people having to go off sick, with people losing out on income because working from home just isn't accessible in the way that working in the office was. So that's been a real issue. In terms of benefits, one of the things that we as an organisation for the last 20 odd years has always known is the answer to accessibility is face-to-face. That's what people want. That's what they've always wanted for advice, for benefits help. They've always wanted that face-to-face appointment. We're not providing face-to-face support anymore since March, and neither are the majority of other organisations. So nearly every support organisation has moved to doing things by Zoom, to doing telephone appointments. And obviously these just are not accessible for disabled people. We've done what we can to try and mitigate that. So we've, we've started a special project to support the deaf community to access help and advice. We're doing face-to-face, going out to people's homes where we have to. So where they can't get the help and support any other way, we will go out and do it. And our staff have got all the necessary PPE. One of the other knock-on effects with everything being digital, and things like this are really good because at least we still can get things done. And I think my favourite phrase of the night has got to be that it's like celebrity squares. I love that. But digital isn't good for everybody. Virtual isn't good for everybody. And one of my fears, thanks Janet, one of my biggest fears is that as we go into winter, people are going to need money for food. They're going to need money for fuel. They've got children at home that need to get the lessons via tablets, via laptops. They need internet access. They're expected to work from home. It's, internet access and smartphones and all of that is a real issue for people, and it's putting people in poverty. It's absolutely putting people in poverty. And I think isolation before we went into this pandemic was massive for disabled people. The biggest killer in this country it's getting even worse now. People are even more isolated because things aren't accessible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mel. I'm going to invite Anne Oakes, manager from who's the chair of Acorn, to address the meeting.
Yeah, cheers. Hiya. Yep, so I'm from Acorn, which is a community and tenants union. So we kind of work along the lines of a trade union, but around issues in public space, in the community, and especially around housing. So a lot of us are tenants, our members are tenants, and we are obviously, yeah, renters are getting hit hard by the pandemic. So Acorn has had a national Housing is Health campaign since the pandemic, kind of calling on the government to freeze rents and also extend the eviction ban, and kind of pressure from tenants unions got that eviction ban end pushed back for like another 3 months, but the Tories have given the green light to elections now, given the green light to evictions. So yeah, we're expecting like in the next 6 months there's going to be like a big surge in evictions happening all over the country. Before COVID, half of working renters were one paycheck away from losing their home because they don't have savings. So as well as like getting tenants organised and campaigning nationally to pressure the government to deal with this kind of social crisis for tenants, we're also doing what we always do in Acorn, which is taking direct action to protect tenants anyway, where the state isn't going to do that. So we're building an army across the country, training people up in their communities to resist eviction. So in Lancaster and Morecambe, where we're based, we've been training up lots of local people in eviction resistance. That's happening in Bristol, Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, all over the country. And we're building a big red army to keep people in their homes, resist evictions, and build the kind of organised communities that people are going to need to survive this crisis. And we know that renters and workers are getting shafted, and we've got to stand together. Acorn's been supported by local trade unions in Lancaster and Morecambe, and we've been out on their picket lines. And we know that, when we stand together, there's nothing we can't win. So we've got to join up these struggles like we're doing tonight. And I think it's brilliant. So, thanks very much for having us.
Thank you very much, Anna. And Acorn are fantastic organisations, working with them across the country and absolutely doing a brilliant job. Can I invite Jack O'Dowd, who's from Henry University, Lancashire University, to the meeting, please?
Thanks, Ian. My name's Jack. I'm a student at Lancaster University and also a Labour City Councillor up in Lancaster. Since the university's returned just over a month ago, over 30,000 university students and staff across the UK have now tested positive for coronavirus. Over 450 of those at Lancaster University. And countless more students have been imprisoned in their halls, basically self-isolating in cramped and overpriced accommodation. University campuses have seen how the pandemic is causing crises affecting all aspects of people's lives, as students unable to find work now struggle to afford rent and food, and as workers' physical and mental health is being put at risk as they're forced to continue unnecessary face-to-face teaching. As the universities begin to make excuses, we must keep reminding them of one thing, that all of this was avoidable. The UCU has been warning since the summer that face-to-face teaching should be suspended, and the government's own advisors in SAGE called for universities to go online only over a month ago. But the government and vice-chancellors have ignored all the warnings, because in the neoliberal university, public health and workplace safety are secondary concerns to the main priority of university managers, and that's money. The primary dynamic which shapes students' relationship with their universities is one of financial exploitation. The marketisation of higher education has seen rising tuition fees, of course, but also universities working with private capital to develop more and more student accommodation with higher and higher rent. Here at Lancaster, this has never been more stark. As hundreds tested positive and over 1,000 students were self-isolating on campus, the university began charging students £18 a day simply for food. The university had encouraged students to come back to campus just to collect their tuition fees and rent and then lock them up in their holes. And then they abused their monopoly in the food supply to try and turn a quick profit. But where the university failed in their basic duty of care, fellow students stepped in with the University Labour Club fundraising, organising and delivering over 100 free food boxes so that their fellow students wouldn't go hungry in self-isolation. Instead of apologising and offering sick students with free food, as other universities have done, Lancaster just doubled down in their profiteering, last week announcing that they had decided to yet again raise all campus rents for the next academic year. The pandemic has exposed the fundamental flaws with the way our society and economy are organised. The inequalities and injustices inherent to capitalism are now clear for us all to see. But there's reason to be hopeful. With students organising rent strikes in campuses across the country and campus trade unions only growing stronger, it's becoming clear that we are not going to take this lying down. On our campuses, in our workplaces and on the streets, the fight for students' rights, renters' rights and workers' rights will continue. Solidarity. Thank you.
And solidarity to you, and thank you very much for that, Jack. I don't think we've got the video, have we, Janet? No?
No, apologies, I've not been able to get it to work, but we can post it on the Facebook page.
That's brilliant, thank you very much. So, I believe we're going to have this evening now outlined for exactly what we're looking to do and what we're asking for. And that's going to be addressed now by Audrey Glover from Lancaster and Morecambe Trades Council. Just to put you under a bit of pressure, Audrey.
Thanks, Ian. I just want to say, everybody who's been in this meeting knows that we're in for a blooming big battle, and it's the battle of our lives. We've got to stick together. Unity is strength. Wherever there is a single strike or protest, we've all got to rally round and support it, I think. I think this is the way we've got to move. We've got to mobilise. The person who talked about the Chorley A&E, that it wasn't an isolated, the broad movement, people in the community doing everything that they could to support it, I think is really, really important. And the other thing I want to say before I start summing up the ideas of what we can do is, we haven't really had a speaker from Stand Up to Racism tonight, but we have to resist any attempt to use racism to divide us. The disgusting scenes yet again that are almost going to make me cry now about refugees dying in the bloody English Channel because they won't open the borders, and people who are actually entitled to live and breathe in this country who can't actually become legal because there's no way of them actually, while they're stuck in Calais, of actually processing their blooming claims. So I just think, I want to say, under lockdown, things have been difficult, but I'll link into that because Black Lives Matter were able to form many times socially distanced protests that was safe. We had the biggest anti-racist demonstration that Lancaster has ever seen. 500 people in Lancaster, in Dalton Square, under lockdown, socially distanced, sanitized, everything. So we can actually have physical protests. But I want to come on to some of the things that have been suggested, most of them in the chat, I think, by Eugene. And I think the first thing is, this Saturday is 31st, is the end of the furlough. And we're People Before Profit has a massive national rally, Michael Rosen, John McDonnell, 12 o'clock, to call for the extension of the furlough in the first instance. And we, for a start in Lancaster, have just called an event for Saturday at 11:30, because what National People Before Profit are saying is, we'll start the rally at 12. And like Tina said, we're having to try and find new ways of organising. And I think people have done some incredibly imaginative things on Zoom and using technology. So in advance of the rally, we're being asked to hold local protests. It doesn't have to be, it can just be a photo opportunity. So get there with your banners, with your placards on whatever issue, extend the furlough, no evictions, extend free school meals, no to child poverty, no to austerity, no to giving bloody billions to private companies to do a useless track and trace. get yourselves out in wherever your locality is and get a photo up on the People Before Profit or a video, People Before Profit website before 12 o'clock. And I think the plan is to have the rally, but then to have a big virtual national demonstration, if you like, of these protests everywhere. So we've kicked the ball rolling in Lancaster, but it'd be great if people in Preston, Burnley, Blackburn, wherever can do something as well. Because some of these social media protests can really have an impact. The other thing is, in terms of the strikes are key. Rolls-Royce and UClan. So we should automatically be setting up within our organisations, within our unions, collections, I think, ready for the Rolls-Royce strikers and for UClan strikes. And I think something that we can do, and this brings me back, Ian Hodson, to the Hovey strikes at 2 o'clock in the morning, bringing people down from Lancaster. I remember, I think we can get cavalcades on that Friday morning to go to the start of those strikes at 6 o'clock over in Barnoldswick, take cavalcades of cars, that's still fine under social distancing, 2 in a car or whatever, and go and support those strikers and get that strike right off to a good start. Like I said at the beginning, it's the fight of our lives. We've got to unite. And like Tina said, all of this is meaningless unless we're not fighting for the climate at the same time. So solidarity, comrades, let's get organised.
And that was beautifully wound up for exactly what it is, what today's been all about. And obviously, can I thank all of the speakers for the contributions? I mean, obviously, the most important thing is that the people that attended here tonight have heard about the opportunities that we can have when we join together to win. And that's what we must do. We must win in our communities and win for our class to make our society better. We hope that you will continue to join the People Before Profit events that are happening, obviously in the locality in Lancashire, but also nationally too. We hope you can support the strikes. We hope you can put that message out to those people that you meet on the bus or meet in the shops when you're having your socially distanced conversations about the importance of us all standing together. We are all in this together, and it's important that we recognise, no matter what divisory tactics that the government uses, the only way that we win is when we stand together in solidarity with wherever we've come from in the world. You know, there is no borders, there is no discrimination that's acceptable. We should recognise that we only win when we stand with each other in solidarity. So thank you for coming along tonight, and enjoy the rest of your evening, and good night.